So, looking at the continent of North America and the U.S. portion, what we see is a couple of large mountain ranges. This is the Rocky Mountains that go from Canada through the U.S. down to Mexico. There's a coastal range, Sierra Nevadas, here in California and up along Oregon and Washington. And over on the East Coast, there are smaller, more eroded mountain range called the Appalachian Mountains, and these are much less steep and pronounced than the Rocky Mountains. But the important ocean features here include the Gulf of Mexico, where there's a loop current that comes around, bends around Florida, comes up the east coast. This is a warm water, fast-flowing current called the Gulf Stream. And you can see the Bahamas from the satellite here, offshore Florida. The Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean over here has a different kind of current, a southerly flowing current called the California current, which induces upwelling and cooler water. The airflow in the continent here is west to east generally, and so the weather systems pass through that way. Sometimes in the winter there are Arctic fronts that come through, and then in the fall and summer we have hurricanes that have an origin down in the tropics. They move, circulate counterclockwise. They come up and hit the East Coast. Hurricane Sandy followed this path last year. And then back in 2005, a large Hurricane Katrina came up the Gulf of Mexico and hit New Orleans, and causing several thousand deaths. Most of the continent is above the Tropic of Cancer, and it goes just down below Florida. So this means everything above this is temperate and climate's relatively moderate. There are winter rains. It's a Mediterranean climate over on the west coast, affected by El Nino, La Nina cycle, the ENSO cycle. And the east coast, sort of a year-round rain. There's a North Atlantic oscillation, which is a interannual variability of rainfall, but not as pronounced as El Nino. I'm going to describe the major river basins. The first and largest is the Mississippi River, which extends up into 26 U.S. states, all the way up into the Great Lakes up here, and then into Canada, follows the edge of the Rocky Mountains, and then down to New Orleans, where it comes out into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the Mississippi River is sometimes called the Missouri-Mississippi, because and the Ohio River is also involved in forming that Mississippi River. Over on the west coast, we see a large river basin, the Colorado River, which goes into Mexico. It used to flow into the Sea of Cortez. It's pretty much dry by the time it gets to the Mexican border. Another large river basin in the west coast is the Columbia River, which extends up into Canada and comes out in the border between Washington and Oregon. And then on the east coast, there's Chesapeake Bay and the Chesapeake watershed. This is a place where I live and work, and forms the largest estuary, median of freshwater and saltwater. There's also in Florida a large watershed that forms up in the upper part of the state and flows south. This is the River of Grass that forms the Everglades. In terms of impacts on the water cycle, we have large thirsty cities which use a lot of water. The city of Los Angeles steals their water from the Colorado and imports it down from San Francisco. The city of Chicago is able to get its water out of Lake Michigan, but it's actually reversed the Chicago River. It used to flow into Lake Michigan. Now it flows the other way to the Mississippi. New York City gets its water from upstate through a series of aqueducts. The city of Miami has been taking its water out of what's normally the Everglades. The city of New Orleans, currently a drought in the Mississippi River, has influenced their water supply, so they're looking for sources farther upstream. So some of the issues associated with water and the pollution, the Lake Erie here and the Great Lakes had a problem of too much phosphorus, so it created all these algal blooms. So they created a phosphorus ban to reduce that problem. Chesapeake Bay here has too much nitrogen and too much phosphorus. The Mississippi River produces lots of nitrogen and phosphorus from the cornfields of the Midwest, and as it flows out into the Gulf of Mexico, a large dead zone is formed because of the over-enrichment of nutrients. Over on the west coast, we have sediment runoff associated with the winter rains, and some contamination associated with that. Since most of this continent is above the Tropic of Cancer, what we see is that there's a large seasonal component to these problems, these issues associated with over-enrichment of nutrients are associated typically in the summer, and the sediment runoff is typically in the winter. So that's a broad overview of the U.S. water cycle and some of the issues associated with it.